Today we're talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a 2022 film written and directed by Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. I feel like you guys are gonna have to do some of the heavy lifting on this one. I was just a little bit, I guess, lost. Um, I think well, to start with the positive for me, like I thought there were a lot of admirable things about this film, like the sheer amount of creative, imaginative scenes, right? From like the bagel stuff to the hot dog hands, which I thought was legitimately hilarious. Um, I think I was just expecting something different. I was expecting a family drama with like the multiverse elements sort of assisting to tell the story, as opposed to the multiverse experience really being just front and center. Um, which I felt I don't know if that justified the 2 hour, like 2 hour 15 minute like runtime. I just thought it was just very long. And the jokes like they started to become a bit played out to me. But yeah, I'm really curious about what you guys have to say about it. Let's start with some of the opening images here. So we start on this really warm nighttime shot. We see this circular mirror, right, of a family having fun. They're singing karaoke. Um, and the shot shifts to daytime, this empty mirror. We see obviously Evelyn on the table. She's inundated with all of these receipts, these bills. She's getting ready to go to the IRS. We get a glimpse into her really chaotic life. Her husband is trying to console her, but then he has like divorce papers in his hands. Obviously, they're getting ready for the celebration. So they're getting ready for New Year's. The daughter is very upset. The mother isn't understanding of a relationship with this other woman. So there's this messiness and this um, chaos that I think a lot of people can relate to, a lot of families can relate to. I thought that was more so the direction we were going, but once we hit the scenes with the IRS, once we get to the IRS department, like it just goes off the rails, um, which is kind of where the story loses me. Um, but I did like the messiness and like these relationships that they were setting up before that.
So far, so like everything you said, I feel the same. Like, John, I was talking to him like very briefly about it, because we watched it together on the plane, and he called it sort of like it was enjoyable, and he said that it was a bit like one trick pony-ish as far as like the jokes, and so maybe that's where that's coming from. I felt the same. Nevertheless, it's a good trick for that pony, and it was well done visually and everything, but there is something where at some point, calling something well done ceases to be like only the presentation and really the flow of the story. And I remembered that after watching it on the plane, I blamed watching it on the plane for like not understanding like kind of what was this, you know what I mean? Like I understand it was sort of family drama, multiverse stuff, and then it's like they're trying so hard to go like this, but it's sort of like you're just in your own orbits, you're next to each other, but it's and everybody kind of I think understands that, and it's sort of like the messiness helps us be more forgiving of the fact that like the fixes were easy. I found like even as I cried watching it, as the rewatch this time, and I cried and watching it on the plane at the reconciliation. I still feel like a bit hollow about it because it's like nobody kind of did the difficult work. You showed us difficult kung fu pinky work, but like what work was actually done, and also like what was fixed, because this time, like watching it, I was more rooting for the relationship um of Wayman and Evelyn. Oh no, wait, Wayman and
Yeah,
wait,
the husband and the
Yeah,
Yeah.
is Michelle Yeoh's name
Yeah, yeah.
Evelyn? Okay, yeah.
Evelyn, yeah.
Um, because like it kind of got lost in the mix, the fact that women wanted a fucking divorce. That's horrible. Especially as like she realizes later, um, I managed to luck out by marrying a very kind, understanding man. You know what I mean? It's like so there is that arc. I feel like she completes it, but with her marriage as opposed to the bigger, I guess, question of the relationship between mother and daughter. But like even as I liked it, it was kind of like I will never have that in my life, nor will ever anyone have that in their lives kind of ever. So it just feels like a bit fairy tale-ish and in parts because of that, emotionally gratuitous there.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense to me. Don, what about you?
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely more positive on this than either. Like I loved this movie. This was the first time I saw it, so it seems like each of you had the experience of seeing it on a plane and then rewatching it, and maybe it is possible that sort of like the spectacle of it all, and then there is a lot of very impressive spectacle, like would not get me as far along on second viewing. But the first time watching, did have this experience of like being like blown away by the visuals and like sort of like the filmmaking audacity essentially. But like Soul, what you said was sort of like you thought it was going to be a family drama, and then it very quickly got into sort of the multiverse aspect, and that sort of took over a little bit. I thought actually one of its strengths was the balance, like the fact that you have a family drama taking place with an immigrant family in a laundromat, sort of pretty damn well coinciding with this like crazy sci-fi epic. Um, like for me, that did give enough heart where, and like by the end, both the relationships between Evelyn and Wayman and the relationship between Evelyn and Joy get to places that are like pretty like conventionally unsatisfying, but also really real and that therefore very satisfying. So for me, like Wayman, you get to a point where essentially the nutshell of Wayman is like, don't take my pacifism and optimism as a weakness. It is a strength, right? Like I am choosing to see the good in things and not only see the negative, and that is how I've been fighting for things this whole time. And that's like a really subtle character. Like that's a hard thing for that to be the character's um motivation and his whole story. And then with Joy, who we kind of think is sort of the villain of the whole thing, we realize she's not really a villain, right? She's just when you do know everything everywhere all at once, you kind of like that sort of everythingness negates anything and nothing has any meaning, right? And it kind of goes back and forth a couple times in their last interaction with like maybe almost settling on like, you're right, none of this matters. But ultimately, it doesn't. Ultimately, Evelyn is like, as much as anything can matter, it's basically the love that we feel and like the moments that we have with each other. And like, yeah, everyone knows that we're all going to die and like there's going to be a lot of crap in life. But that being true doesn't mean none of it matters. It means that knowing that we have to not take things for granted and we have to try to like live in those moments of love and appreciation as much as possible. So, like, that is the takeaway from a movie that is essentially like crazy martial arts, sci-fi. Like the fact that those are the things I was thinking about, as opposed to sort of like the multiverse of it all. Like, oh, what does this mean? And like the travel and the multiple versions, like, and also like you both mentioned like a little bit of confusion, which I think there was like a little bit of confusion here. But then I was thinking, for me, when the first movie that obviously I think probably jumps out at everybody watching this movie is probably The Matrix, right? Like I don't know if either of you thought of that, but I was immediately thinking of The Matrix because there's this moment where it's okay, this is what reality was. This is now we're going to explain this. This is actual reality. But then I was thinking, well, what is in The Matrix? There's what, three or four very significant like monologue scenes that are taken just to have people even begin to understand the world building and what's happening. And here, like this movie never stops for that at all. Like you get the moment in the elevator where Wayman just with pure acting switches and you're confused, but you're like, what the hell? And then the movie just goes from 0 to 60 and like for the rest of the way through, and you're kind of like figuring it out as much as you need to through the action. And there's no moment really where someone is like stopping. Like even when he's trying to explain stuff to her, it's in the like the middle of an action scene in the IRS office. Like it keeps going, this movie. It's like bombastic, but in a way that like I actually thought was enjoyable. And I'm the type of person who generally doesn't like what I would call bombastic filmmaking. But like I was just like, holy crap, like the what these people set out to do, they did, and it's like for me, very impressive.
Yeah, yeah, sort of the again, sort of like the sheer creativity of putting all of those scenes together and the editing and like the process. It's kind of yeah, it's like unfathomable to me. Like it's I don't think I could ever pull something like that off. Um, and there is this sort of like almost like this charm charm to it. It's almost as if like the kids are like playing and there's this like play make believe sort of it almost feels like they're making things up as they go along almost, and it feels, I don't know, that fantasy world feels there's like a charm to it which I think was yeah, nice. um are you guys like multiversed out? Like are you guys kind of tired of the multiverse now? Is it like in like I there's so many films that I've seen now. But I think they're all
I,
well done. I mean, the Spider-Man comes to mind immediately. I'm sorry, go ahead, Susie.
no, I was actually thinking about that, but I'm not burnt out on it, and I don't know
Yeah.
why. Everybody's got their own take.
Mm,
You have, yeah, it's not like any genre thing or any. It's and I could have. I am watching this as the second watch in a very cynical time in my life emotionally,
mhm.
which is weird. But like, I guess like I'm rethinking familial relationships and just other types, like the families we choose and stuff like that. And it was I guess like what I don't appreciate is like the quick fix and the easy answer of like what I perceive to be the fantastic coming in, swooping in to fix this relationship. The central one that I think that we're supposed to be rooting for. Maybe the family as a unit, yes, but really it's mother-daughter story. It wants to be. Um it just let me, yeah, I even as I'm like emotional and crying and stuff, it's at the end, it was like, that's nice for them. You know what I mean? Like I kind of like walked away feeling from it the same sort of like, I don't know, not hopefulness. You know what I mean? It's in a weird way, which I know that like I think the aim was for the opposite. Um, but like multiverse stuff doesn't bug me. It's just the presentation,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, yeah. I guess yeah, that's kind of what I was meaning. Like the I don't know. Sometimes I feel like less is more, and like just like the arbitrary sort of nature and like the metaphors being very very on the nose to me. Um, I don't know. It just didn't do anything for. I didn't feel. I didn't cry at that at all at the end. I didn't feel emotional at all because again, like I think it points to kind of what you were saying about like the work being done there. Like I feel like there was no. I don't know. I didn't feel anything at the end. And I really wanted to. I really wanted to root for that relationship between them, but I just didn't. I felt nothing at the end.
So in terms of like Susie, what you're saying, like I could definitely see So let's imagine, like, in terms of like the easiness of the between Joy and Evelyn, I could imagine it not being maybe like something you could extrapolate from, because you could say like, okay, well, this worked for them, but they also like had a crazy thing where they experienced everything and all of time, everything all at once, and so that's literally can only happen to them. So like I could maybe see that aspect of it where you're kind of like, this is such a specific, impossible thing that it's like I'm watching something just that could only be relevant to these two characters if you didn't want to like take anything out beyond it. But so like you didn't feel anything even between like when they cut to that scene with in the street with Wayman and Evelyn, and she is basically saying like it's a good thing we didn't ever get together because like you're doing well for yourself, I'm doing well for myself. If we did get together, we would it would be like laundromat and taxes, and then he like eventually turns around and he's just like she's trying to make him feel better, but it like breaks his heart because he's kind of like, I would have loved, like I basically like I loved you so much that I would have taken that life with you if I could. So like what about that idea? The idea that like, you know, obviously this is a film about choices and every choice we make takes away other choices and leads us down a path, right? So like but like that has to speak to you in some way in terms about like the sacrifice, the choices we make, the sacrifices we make, and like possibilities.
Yeah, what could have been, what should have been. I don't know. I just I was just so Susie's laughing. Why I was just so distracted by the Wong Kar-wai like tribute of it. It was just I just didn't.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. I was like, I forgot that was happening. And then because I watched it on the plane the first time, and then I watched it the second, I was like, I fucking forgot this. This is just like In the Mood for Love. And I know that it's sort of like a direct lift. So I'm like,
Yeah.
are we have supposed to have noticed this like all throughout? And then I was like, I can't tell. Maybe this, maybe that. But that one aspect of it was such a lift from there.
But that, I mean, yeah, that was purposeful, right? Like it wasn't
I
like,
know. That's why I was like, where is it appearing elsewhere in the movie? But I couldn't find like such obvious ones.
yeah. I don't, that was definitely the one that I could see being thrown off by that too. Like, wait a minute, were there other ones this whole time that I was missing? That there's like some Steve Martin movie, I forget the name of it, where they basically made like a whole movie just out of clips of other movies and like put him into them. It's a pretty interesting experiment like decades ago. But yeah, like I could see that being its own separate thing. But I don't know. It's interesting like you're both talking about how you felt or didn't feel at the end, so I don't really I think those are valid, right? Like we change or affect how we feel at the end of something. It's how you feel. I think I just felt like I this movie ended and I it was like one of those, granted it's fleeting and lots of art does this to us, but like certain art you watch it and at the end you're like, all right, this is going to change my life. Like I'm going to be more appreciative of things. I'm going to try to put as much of myself into things and into a situation as I can because like really that's all I can do is like bring myself to the table and like try really hard at experiencing things and living in the now and being present and all that stuff. And like this was one of those movies for me that like I felt that at the end. But if it didn't if for me all the craziness of it is not what did that, like the multiverse of it all was almost like incidental. It was really just the relationship between the wife and husband and the wife and daughter. And so if you didn't feel ultimately really strongly about those relationships, then I would see this being like, okay, it's a cool movie, like there's a lot of like craft stuff in there that's like really cool to see, but that's all it is.
Yeah, I just wish that was, I guess, more like concentrated, like I felt like I was I was just waiting for those moments. It felt like it almost feels like it was like those important moments interspliced in with all of this craziness that I just like, oh, I was like, oh, when is this going to be? Like, when am I going to get to the important parts? So like to bring back the video game analogy, I felt like I was playing the game, just waiting for the cutscenes, I was like waiting.
Mm.
Whereas in something like Into the Spider-Verse, the first one, not the sequel, um, but I felt like, yeah, it was the multiverse stuff wasn't sort of an assistant to tell this really interesting story about this kid and his family and him finding himself, finding his confidence. So it just felt more together and cohesive to me. Um, yeah, and just this just felt long. But I think you're right. Like ultimately, like the messaging part of it was there, but it was just I felt like it was a lot weaker than it could have been. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's kind of the problem I had with the second Spider-Verse. Do you guys have you guys watched the second one across the? I think it's called Across the Spider-Verse. Have
Yeah,
you watched it,
I did.
Susie? Did you like it better
Yeah,
than the first one? Or I mean, just not comparing necessarily, but like,
I'm happy to compare. I liked it way less. I loved that first one. I thought it was like pretty out the park. The second one was trying so hard to draw those emotions from me that it was like that like literally I felt like their foot on my chest while they're pulling it out my face. It's like this is not how you get an emotional reaction out of anyone. Having a long drawn out conversation. No, no, it's like where did all of that story crafting go? I have no idea because it was not present in that second one. I got I mean, so when that kind of thing happens, it overshadows like any good I felt like
mm,
previously in that same movie somehow, and I'm just like, I'm over this.
yeah.
At the same time, like any movie can redeem itself, and the way it does that by surprising me. I think like at some point I was definitely waiting for Joy to surprise me, but like she was just the same kind of like energy. It was the Jobu Tupaki or it was Joy. And it's like there was no change. There was it was basically like Joy having a conniption about not feeling seen or heard, validated in any way. And I don't really see any of Joy kind of like giving of herself or something. I don't know. It was like it did not feel like it just felt like a tantrum that comes to its natural sort of I'm just tired now, and she even says it that it's like when you're fighting with someone and you just both get tired and you just stop as opposed to any resolution having happened, and it was like okay, I guess everybody agrees that now is the natural time for this argument to be over. That doesn't mean anything's not necessarily resolved. I don't even need a clean resolution. It's not that. It's just I did not see a change in Joy, and that would have maybe like put a button on it in a clearer, more satisfying way for me, maybe.
Mhm. Were you guys surprised by the grandfather at the end of him like holding the girlfriend's hand and
Um, I went with it. I
okay.
I I think it was right for the film because it was like it continued making me feel better, and like him still being like stubborn about it would not have added anything. I did not think it was consistent with the character. Like
Okay,
me
yeah.
thinking, and this is not obviously I don't have an Asian family, but if I'm mapping it onto, you know, like my parents were immigrants, so if I'm mapping it onto a generation back from there, like for someone to be so afraid of like letting like I don't even want to tell him that this is true because he's so traditional for that same character to at the end be accepting when like in that world it's still that one plane he hasn't gone through like he isn't the alpha version of his name so he doesn't hasn't had all those experiences whereas like the whole conceit of the film is that Evelyn has all of that knowledge and so that knowledge and experience is what has enabled her to realize like this is the change I need to make. But that grandfather hasn't. So why is he accepting? Was Evelyn really just wrong about what her father would say this whole time? Like that, I didn't really, as a character motivation, I didn't think that that was necessarily true. But at the same time, for the feeling of the end of the film, it's like sure, like add it in and like because we don't want him to now be ostracized. We don't want this to be like, oh, I'm sticking it to that guy because that guy represents the old like it's just like okay, yeah, we're all okay with this. Um, and I also think it was nice though to me, like to your point, Susie, about like the button of it all. Like I think it would have been too much for me if Joy like threw her arms open and she was like, finally, like you're accepting me. Like there's a moment where that it is a little bit of back and forth, and she's kind of like, what? It's not all just better now. It's like it's if you go through your whole life of someone like not seeing you and not like supporting you in the way that they're supposed to, it's a great moment if they try to make up for that or acknowledge it, but it's not going to make everything better instantly. So I think they did a pretty good job of like giving us hope that their relationship could get better. But for me, the ending wasn't like, yes, everything is perfect now between us. Which I think was again like kind of like the perfect dialed in sort of way that a relationship could sort of start to mend. I think that's kind of where it goes, you know. I mean, they do have a more overt moment with Wayman and Evelyn where they go back to the IRS at the end and she like stops him to kind of kiss him. But like I was a sucker even for that, right? Because like this is the guy who loves her, but was at a point where he was just like, we need a divorce because this is not working. And then he's like begging her for attention too in the beginning, like we need to have a conversation, and she's just like putting him off. And now they're like literally on their way to the IRS, which is the thing she was planning for in the beginning. And she, you know, and she takes a moment to be like, all right, I'm gonna stop and like, you know, kiss you and appreciate you. Like that's for me a significant enough change to be so distracted by everything in the beginning and then by the end to be like, we're doing it, and but I'm gonna be here present and I'm gonna appreciate you because, you know, you essentially put up with me for the whole time I
Mm.
was kind of being a monster. Um, and then even that's overly simplified. I don't think Evelyn's character is a monster in the beginning. I think she's just overwhelmed and dealing with so much all the time. And like it's a lot. And also the movie tells us that she's currently living in her least potential timeline, right? So she even has justified reason. She could have done so many other things, and she does have all those other interests. And she was put in a situation where she, you know, had a husband and a family and a laundromat, and that's the life she's living right now. And so to be still continue to live in that timeline and get to a place where you're like, I'm in my least potential timeline, but I'm still gonna appreciate what I have. Like that's um pretty kind of like I don't know, that's a pretty big takeaway for me because I'm like I don't know. It makes you sit back and you're like, what the hell am I complaining about? Like, why? What good am I doing? And you know, complaining in general, like that's how people converse. There's nothing. Everyone's always going to complain. There's no problem with complaints, but like the true feeling, like you can complain about little things, but also not feel like my life is shit, right? Like you can complain while simultaneously acknowledging my life's pretty good. Um, and it's on me to enjoy the good parts. So like that's for a movie to have me thinking that again, like at the end, like that's and then the last thing I want to say is like I also think if you were to ask somebody like why make a film? Like this story, I think you'd be hard pressed to tell it in any medium other than film. This is like the most cinematic, like the frames in here, like the way things, if you tried to explain what was happening in this level of detail in a book, it would have to be thousands and thousands of pages. Like every little moment has so much stuff that's thrown in there, even though it like not relative for the plot, but just like when they're like moving in between the multiverses and like different, there's stuff that's thrown in there that's never explained. It's just like it's almost like some of it's very dreamlike, I felt, which I always feel like film and dreams are like such a good marriage. Like there's so much stuff that's just thrown in here, like out of someone's brain. It feels like it's like exploding. And like I was like, yeah, this is a film because you could not do this in any with anywhere. Like you can only do this because film can do this. And even like film within the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years that could do like this is something that can only exist right now. Um, and like, I don't know, I was just very impressed by that aspect of it as well. Like it's a lot of stuff that's going on. And again, I'm not the prime audience for that because a lot of times if a lot of the kitchen sink is thrown into a movie, my brain just shuts off. It's like the equivalent of like, you know, listening to classic rock and there's a crazy electric guitar lick and my brain is just like, I don't care about that. Like that's the same thing that happens if there's a lot of cutting and a lot of effects and a lot of nuts. Like, but this was just like I appreciated it in this film. So I don't know how it managed to do that, but I did.
I was reminded of Groundhog's Day. Um, but man, that film was just so much. I felt like so much relief and joy at the end of that film. It was just so much cleaner to me, like the storytelling. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out why I didn't connect with this and it connected so much with Groundhog's Day. It's like a similar sort of magical like realism stuff going on, but like yeah, I don't know.
I think Groundhog Day is a great film. Um, a film that I actually did not like. It's like one of the few films.
Really?
The first time I watched it, I didn't like it, and then I watched it again, and I was like, "What the hell was wrong with me?" Like, I love this movie now, and I do think it's a masterpiece, but the scope of it is just so different, right? Groundhog Day is about Bill Murray's character. It's one character. It's the same thing over and over again. This is about a family of characters, and it's almost nothing is the same ever, right? It's always jumping to stuff that's so different, even if the fact that it's different doesn't add anything to the plot. It's just like, and also like from a filmmaking perspective, it's pretty standard, pretty slow moving, pretty
Yeah.
calm. Like this is like Groundhog's Day on steroid. Like this
Yeah.
is like formally filmically, it's so different of the type of movie. I don't know. It'd be an interesting double feature because I do love Groundhog Day. I probably haven't seen it in 10 years. I do. I think I probably did have more of an emotional reaction to Groundhog Day in terms of like feeling for that specific character, but I had more of like a self-reflective, like mind-changing experience with Everything Everywhere All at Once. So maybe it's more like that only happens if you're receptive to that and like going into it with that as a possibility. I don't know.
I don't know if I feel like if this was like the younger me, if we were still like in film school, I think we'd just be breaking down all the shots and the like the technical stuff and maybe I'm getting older. I don't know. I just kind of want to see kind of the larger sort of like the image of it, like the painting of it, um, the broader strokes, I suppose. Um,
Also, I mean, it's not like this movie was made for nothing, but supposedly the budget is $25 million.
well, it's not that much.
So for it's not that much at all. Like
Yeah,
for a movie like this, like they're spending over $100 million on Marvel movies
yeah.
for effects, basically. And like for this movie to do everything that it does for $25 million, like that was what people would be like, oh, well, you could make a comedy for $25 million, like that, like, you know what I mean? Like that's a movie that's a pretty straightforward movie without crazy effects for Hollywood, like that's a relatively low budget. And there's nothing that seems low budget about this movie to me. Like it doesn't feel like there was anything that they wanted to do that they didn't accomplish. Obviously there probably was because there almost always is, but like this feels like a very, very expensive movie to me.
Mm.
So even that is like a pretty crazy accomplishment. I mean, I think that what you're saying, Soldo, about like it feels like the older we get, the more we realize what's important is the writing than the filmmaking. And like I would say, like I think the writing is fine in this movie, but the writing as like um again, like the audacity of the writing and like the overall planning, but you're saying more like there probably is a version of a movie that's the family drama in the laundromat where the writing is better, quote unquote better for like what you want, and where that's more like emotionally fulfilling at the end, which like I could believe for sure.
Mm. Yeah, it was interesting. Like Susie's points about like the Spider-Man, because that first movie, I don't think it required the metaverse multiverse. Um, yeah, I could see that story going down in a different way, but with just the same amount of like resonance. Like, yeah, I think it's just a fun assistant. And the second one, like the problem I had with the second one was, um, like the canon breaking. I don't know, like Tom, you didn't watch it, but the yeah, the breaking of what's supposed to happen, this canon events, I think they called it. It was just, yeah, it was just so like on the nose, and I don't know. Um, First one was just a very nice, again, just coming of age family drama, with those elements kind of added in. But
I guess my question is like, let's say we take the multiverse aspect of this out, right? Let's say we start where we start before the elevator scene, and then we want to end with Evelyn and Joy's character on a better potential path for the relationship, and Wayman and Evelyn's character on a better path. So you basically have the beginning and the end, right? Like, what whole second act of this movie are you going to put under normal circumstances that could legitimately get someone from starting here and ending there? That isn't going to be either like a melodrama or unbelievable or like just or really boring. I don't tend to watch straight dramas that often. So for me,
you
this
know
was
what
like this is the best answer.
you know what I really like though? I kind of wanted a whole movie about the hot dog hands. Yeah, I thought that was fun. Yeah, it just was everything all at once, like all over the place, you know?
I did like that the hot dog hands like recurred and came back. It wasn't just because you never when these things cut to you never get a sense of like it could just be a throwaway or it could come back. And like the raccoon and the hot dog, like those things come
Yeah,
back several times.
it was a lot.
You could have just gone to a totally different universe every single time and not come
Uh,
back to anything. But yeah, like it would that do you imagine that a movie that takes the multiverse out of it could get you to those places by the end in an interesting way? Like maybe you've seen straight dramas that do that, and I'm just like missing them. But the ones I've seen, I've always felt like that it's either unearned or just like super boring, and I don't care anyway.
okay, I think I see what you're saying. I don't know, like the wedding banquet comes to mind, like Ang Lee's. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I thought that was pretty good. Um,
It's a big task, such
yeah.
a thing for in one day. That's where it makes it interesting to me. As a challenge, I would take it on, but it's sort of like what would have to happen and what genre of movie would it have to be? Don't know. I don't remember Wedding Banquet. Is that one day?
No, it's not over one day, I don't think. It's right, it's about the that guy who's pretending that he has this girlfriend just to kind of please his dad. But he actually has a boyfriend. Um, like a similar setup actually. And now that I think of it, I haven't thought about that film in a long time, but yeah, I like that. I like that movie. I'll have to revisit it at some point, but man, I don't even remember the ending of that movie. I'm gonna have to revisit it. I remember it being like satisfying though. I remember liking it when I watched it in school. Um,
Did either of you like The Matrix when you first saw it?
yeah,
Yeah, I really like
yeah,
I
and
still
this
like it.
film reminded me of The Matrix too, I think. Um, Parts of it
So,
at least.
so what The Matrix does differently, and maybe this is easier in a way, but like The Matrix is trying to basically get you to think about things and operate on an intellectual level more so than an emotional level, which I think makes it more, it's like less risky in a way and makes it more like broadly successful. Because kind of like what I feel like we're running up against here is like at the end of this movie, neither of you felt that deeply or you felt like you're being manipulated emotionally. Whereas at the end of the Matrix, it's kind of like this badass moment where he like becomes the one. And so you're left with like a very clean feeling at the end. And this was definitely like a messier ending. So I don't know. I just always think about that. And I'm interested to what you hear to say because like sometimes when I'm writing, it does tend to go more towards like the intellectual and I just want to get somebody to think about stuff. But then I've been pushing myself more towards like the emotional, like getting people to feel some stuff. But obviously that is more complicated. So I was like, how would you say they compare in terms of like the feelings or what you're thinking about at the end?
I'm missing the scene where um maybe 2/3 of the way in, um Joy or Jobu to whatever version of Joy is like, I'm giving up on you, mom. Bye now. You want to stay wherever you do, you know what I mean? And I think that would have really done something to put the fire on under Evelyn as opposed to like whatever we're given. As far as like
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah.
the Matrix, I um yeah, the words like clean kind of keep coming in, but I think it was just sort of like I don't know how you can have a family drama and not have it be about emotions. There is just kind of how are you going to have it and have it be an intellectual ending? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess like everything I've thus far said has made it seem like I have difficulty with that um with the ending. But I mean, basically it's sort of like presented with what I was, that is the ending because I already kind of like in the watching of it, I've decided what kind of movie this already is. It's like, oh, okay, by the end, I'm gonna be crying. There, it's gonna be resolved. I can kind of tell in a way where in the Florida Project, with all its messiness, and I don't know where it's headed, even to like when those girls go into Disney World, I don't even know I've forgotten about Disney World. Um, don't have a problem with it. There is something where it's like the word manipulative to me means unearned with by the things that you presented me with. You want something from me by giving me something. You've gotten the reaction from me, but not done the work. The emotional work. I'm not talking all of this stuff is hard, like Rakakuni, all that stuff. Yes, physically very, very difficult. Yes, I get that. I'm just saying, like, in all of that, when did you decide like Joy was okay and that she needs defending? Also, at the same time, I was kind of wondering where is Wayman because I was thinking like,
Mhm.
what does Joy actually even think about her father? I feel like Wayman's supportive, but if I was Joy, I'd be like, where the fuck have you been, Dad? Like, why are you suddenly up in here now? Well, great. It's like if you really wanted to hear how a bitchy daughter sounds, could have asked any daughter. I just feel like it just was not even brought there. You know what I mean? There was nothing said that was cutting in the way mothers and daughters fight. Maybe that's it. I just needed one line that was truly hurtful. Maybe. I don't know. I'm grabbing here because it's like, what am I missing? I don't really know. Especially as it's like, I will recommend the movie and I liked it fine. And yeah, it's just like specifically for me in this place right now, I'm just like, that's nice for you guys. You
I
know,
think that's a really good point.
No, those
Like
are really great
the
points. Yeah. I'm sorry, Dom. Go
it's
ahead.
it's yeah, like it's almost like with Evelyn, they didn't want to make her like show her being so bitchy, so they pulled back on that. But like, yeah, like absolutely, if Wayman has been this good, like what's the Joy Wayman dynamic? Because if anything, if he's been trying to keep the peace, there could have easily been a scene where like he tries to say something and like then that creates tension and like that does feel like a really real family dynamic scene to me. And like I don't think we get anything like that. So that you're right that there kind of is like a missed opportunity there potentially.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I was going to
maybe
say.
I
Yeah.
feel like maybe the filmmakers only kind of don't know the true dysfunction that like mother-daughter relationships can go through. I'm not saying father-sons or son or mother-sons can are not dysfunctional. I'm not saying that at all, but it's just like I know for a fact that the most hurtful things I have ever said have been to my mother. And they can turn on a dime too. It could be like I'm having a great conversation, and for some reason it happens. and that's family. And unfortunately, that's also mothers and daughters. And unfortunately, even more so for me, it's me and my own mother. So it's like, where is that? And it's like, without that, I'm very cynical, maybe. I don't know.
No, there's fathers and sons too, I think. Yeah, for sure. Um,
I think it's
Yeah.
all relationships,
yeah,
right? Like they
all
always
family
say,
relationships. Yeah,
like when
absolutely.
you love someone and you get to know them well enough, what you're essentially doing, whether you know it or not, is you're arming yourself with being the person in the world who's like the best at hurting them. Like if you want to, right? Like you know the exact thing to say to make someone feel like they're a piece of shit if you know them really well. And that's kind of where all like that's what it is, right? It's vulnerability because you're getting close to someone and what you're doing essentially is saying, I know that I'm going to give you the ability to like totally decimate me. That's kind of why it's complicated. And I think that can be in romantic relationships too. I think that can be in all sorts of relationships. And it definitely you're right that we don't see that sort of like cutting, um, even like accidental cutting in this film. Like when you were talking, Susie, I started thinking kind of about Lady Bird a little bit too, and like that sort of mother daughter dynamic to a certain extent. Like there are plenty of examples that we get that are better. Um, Honestly, even a film that I very much did not like compared to this one, but even May December, there were a couple of like on the nose, like cutting comments that the mother makes to her daughter that go further. But I think those were safer because we're not supposed to like that character. Whereas it would be the main character doing it in this case. And that's a lot tougher. Like if I think she could totally pull it off if the writing was there. But I think you could feel the filmmakers worrying about that a little bit. Like, well, if we hate her too much at the beginning, it's not going to work. Um,
What was
but
the
you get the sense that Joy does hate her, and you know the introduction of her girlfriend, all of the weight goes into that one thing. But it's like your relationship was like this before she had that girlfriend.
yeah, it's kind of reminding me of Eternal Sunshine, um, where they do say very hurtful things to each other. What was the ending to that movie? You guys remember that movie?
You know, like the train out to the Montauk or something like that. I saw that a long time ago. I can't
I
They
didn't
remember.
really
realize
like,
that each other and they decide to give it a go anyway. That's like the whole sort of like, well, fuck, you know?
yeah. I remember not liking that film. Um, like it's a really long time since I've watched that film, but
I think there are a
I
lot of
wasn't,
parallels, but again, that's kind of it's not a whole family dynamic, so it's
yeah,
less complicated.
it's not, you're right. But there are a lot of parallels. Yeah, maybe I should rewatch it because I've been thinking about that film a lot for some reason. I don't know why. Um, I thought it was just too lit, like the whole like erasing the memory part. It was just a bit too literal for me. Sort of like in this film, like the metaphors were so just so
I don't know.
I don't know. Um, anything you want to add on to your recommend? I think for you, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I definitely recommend it. It won Best Picture last year, right?
Did it? Yeah. Oh yeah,
And
you're right.
some
It
other
did.
awards.
I'm gonna
So
lose my Asian card.
As the Oscars
Um,
approach, I would say watch it. It's there isn't a lot of stuff I've seen like it. If you,
do you
I
think
do
that
think
it's
it's like
innovative? Do you think it's an innovative sort of
yes,
from a technical standpoint?
I
I mean, even from I guess a storytelling standpoint, I don't know. Do you feel that it's different?
I 100% did, yeah. And not innovative in the way the Matrix was innovative, where it's like we created bullet time and it's like this one technological thing. And like I think it's more like we're filmmakers who are gonna push the envelope in terms of what film can do. Like I felt that very much, but in a good way because they created this multiverse story that justifies it. Otherwise, you're just talking about music videos, right? You're just talking about like visuals for visuals' sake that are cool, but that's like as far as you can go. Whereas here, it's like this story was created to make all of those things necessary, and that's amazing. I'll be interested to see what they do next, because if it's not this multiverse type thing and it's just as bombastic, I would bet money I'll like it significantly less. Because it's like if you just throw spectacle at me, my brain's gonna shut off. And I would say like if you are a filmmaker, you should see this movie because again, $25 million is a lot of money. But to do this for $25 million means that somebody's going to do some version of this for $1 million within the next 5 years. You know what I mean? Because a lot of this it's like thinking through, it's pre-production, and it's like shooting enough stuff and being creative and then editing it together. It's not like, oh, well, that's a special effect that only ILM team could do. It's like, okay, if you get these 6 shots, we're gonna and you get them the right way, we're gonna edit them together where it's one continuous shot moving across. Like there's ways to do some of this stuff that is difficult to do because of the planning, not because of the technology. And I think they're pushing the envelope in just like Eternal Sunshine. Like it's more like I'm gonna be in someone's brain, inside someone's dream state, like, and I'm gonna like make art out of this like cacophony of things that like I'm now letting you see what's in my brain. That's what it felt like to me. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say definitely see it. It's free on Netflix.
Susie, what about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, it was good. I certainly recommend it. I mean, there's like, I don't know, the next time um an Asian cast with like subtitles is going to win an Oscar. Might be a minute. Um I feel like it wanted to be a show or something. You know what I mean? Like it's got plenty for a show. As far as like the emotional story, like the family story that's going on, is like really struggling. It's competing with all of that spectacle.
Yeah.
And you don't need a whole lot of spectacle for it to read a lot of spectacle. And you don't need a whole lot more drama for it to really land. I'm not talking about like we need 20 more minutes of this at the sacrifice of the other stuff. Not at all. It's not that. It's in balance, it's in pacing, it's in it's not even in staying like a few steps ahead of the audience. Even just a half step is enough. I feel like it was just um amusing. I'm glad you brought the phrase music video into the chat, Dom, because that's kind of how I felt. It was like, well, this is amazing. Like watching a music video. Um, yeah.
Did you feel like it didn't take enough risks there, Susie? I think that's maybe what you're saying.
Well, I'm not sure what risks means anymore.
Okay.
It was probably a risk just having it predominantly subtitle. I would, you know, but um as far as like the none of the multiverse stuff and just the family drama, no risks are taken. Zero risks are taken there.
I got it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. If you found it interesting, informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It'll really help us out. We have some really cool discussions lined up for you, so I hope you're looking forward to them, and I'll see you next time.